This poem is about my birth. My grandmother, my mother's mother, was at my birth. She gave me my name after her husband, who had recently died in a sudden accident. My arrival. Showing the creature I landed, I slipped from my mother's womb, flesh connected, laced in a blood spatter. My father waited with a bottle of rum. The moon floated somewhere. The sea drummed and drummed our coastline. Mullets darted in wooded streams. A good night to end labor, Saturday. The country midwife held me up. Look, is your third boy child? My mother asked, him all right? Yes, all eyes, all ears, yes, all hands, all feet, my mother whispered. Thank God. My granny said, my Jim, my husband, you come back? I slept. Roosters crowed all around the village. In the sun's hot eye, my umbilical cord was dressed with wood ash, castor oil, and nutmeg, and buried under a banana sucker. There, a tree made fruits, all mine.
Oh, well, James always spoke about, from a very young age, how excited he was by the power of language. He delighted in reading biblical stories to his family.
Perhaps one of the sort of common perceptions about the Windrush generation were that they were naive men who lived on a small island and had never seen anything of the world. But in fact, James already had been in America on the US farm worker program for 3 or 4 years, so he certainly wasn't naive about the world. My understanding is that the impact of that journey was not immediately realised by him. It was later that he realised what a life-changing experience it had been.
For me, James Berry has an inimitable style of writing, very unique, a very unique voice. He merges Caribbean Creole and Standard English in his own style, his own ways with words, creating for us a powerful, rich, and haunting poetry.
He always manages to tap in to the human condition. So if you take Windrush Songs, it's a book that is really full of human desire and frustration and the real things that you would think about if you left one place that you knew and loved for another, the things you would miss. That for me is there most clearly in his book, Lucy's Letters and Loving, where he adopts the persona of a woman in London writing back to the Caribbean, and all the things that the persona of the poems misses, like the labrish, the gossip.
But even in his brief description of poetry as a form of music that stirs connections, you're getting that sense of connection, that sense of the music of language, the music of movement. Very healthy reference points in his dealing with young people.
This year I had a tutee up in Newcastle, a 13-year-old boy who hated reading and hated English, and I was supposed to instill in him some kind of enthusiasm. And we read together James's book, Ejima and his son. And I had to move back to London before I'd finished teaching this boy. And he begged me for the book, he said, because he had to know what happens in the end. And I realised then that James really did have this ability to connect to all kinds of people.
What do we do with a variation? What do we do with a difference? Do we stand and discuss its oddity, or do we ignore it? Do we shut our eyes to it, or poke it with a stick? Do we clobber it to death, Do we move around it in rage and enlist the rage of others? Do we will it to go away? Do we look at it in awe or purely in wonderment? Do we work for it to disappear? Do we pass it stealthily or change route away from it? Do we will it to become like ourselves? What do we do with the difference? Do we communicate to it? Let application acknowledge it? For barriers to fall down?
I've always been struck by how he has this very nurturing quality about him that makes him one of our most important poets in terms of leaving a legacy within Britain.
His impact is huge, not only as a writer, but also as an editor and an anthologizer of West Indian British poetry, as he would call it. When I finally met James, having wanted to meet him perhaps 3 years before and being told that he was too ill, I felt very disappointed at that time. It really reflected my sense that, a bit like First World War veterans, that the Windrush generation of that age, they were becoming lost to us, and therefore their memories were lost to us. And when I did finally meet him, and I knew that he had Alzheimer's, and he was the first person I'd ever met that had Alzheimer's. It was an absolute delight. It was obvious that he was unwell, but his long-term memory is still in very good shape, and so we were able to talk at length, particularly about the things to do with his childhood and with the poems in the Windrush collection. So I feel very lucky that I've had the chance to spend time with him.
I prepare, and prepare well for England. Me decide and done leave behind all the voice of a slave estate bushman. None of that district bad talk in England, that bush talk of old estate slave man. Hear me speak in England, and see you don't think I a England native. Me nah go say, boy, how you do? Me I go say, how are you, old man? Me nah go say, what you yam last night? Me I go say, what did you have for supper? Patois talk is bushman talk. People who talk patois them damn lazy. Because me bush voice so settle in me and might let me down in a England, me a practice talk like teacher, till me England voice come out a me, like water from hillside rock. Even if you fellows here don't hear me England voice, I have it and hear it in me head.